Hello my sweet friends, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite romance books that I have read so far this year. I was thinking of doing like my favorite romance books just in general, but we would be here for too long. So we're just going to specifically talk about the ones that I've read this year, and there's still a lot to talk about. So let's jump straight into it. I'm back in my like romance reading era. I go through phases. I feel like I went through my fantasy phase and now I'm back in my romance phase, and I'm having so much fun reading romance again. So I'm really excited to talk about all of these books. Where should we start? Let's talk about my favorite YA romance books. Some people love YA, some people don't. So if you don't like YA, you can skip this little portion of the video, but if you like YA like I do, these are some great recs. Of course, we've got to start off with The Summer I Turned Pretty. I can't believe that it took me so long to read this trilogy because it is just such a fun time. There are 3 books in the series. This is the first one. They're all super short and easy and quick to read. I recommend these to a lot of people who want to get back into reading if they like YA because they're just so easy to read, and this trilogy is basically about a girl whose family grew up spending the summer with another family at their beach house. So it's like 2 families that have spent every summer together since they can remember. And the other family that is at this beach house has 2 sons who are quite similar in age to our main character. And she is basically like, which one do I love? So it's a bit of a love triangle situation, but I just love the like nostalgic feeling. It just has like the perfect descriptions of summer and like summer romance and just like falling in love for the first time and all of those things, which I just love. This is one that I'm very hesitant to recommend because it is very YA. So please, if you want to read this, go in with the expectation that it's meant for like a pretty young audience. This is 1,000 Boy Kisses. I hate the cover, but it is what it is. This one is a childhood best friends to lovers, and it's a very like emotional read. It's not the best book I've ever read in my life. A lot of these books also are not like 5-star reads for me. Some of them are like 4.5s. There are some 5-star reads here, but these are all books that I would recommend. So this was like a 4.5 star read for me. But yeah, please go in with the expectation that it's going to be quite immature. It's going to be quite cringy, but it is a really beautiful story still, and I still do think it's worth the read as long as you have the right expectation going in. Another book that I just had so much fun with this year is Alex Approximately by Jenn Bennett. This is just such a fun story. This is about a girl who has an online friend. She doesn't actually know his real name, but she knows that he lives in this town in California, and it turns out that her dad either moves there or lives there, whatever. She goes to stay with her dad for the summer, maybe? Look, I'm sorry if I get any of these details wrong, but she goes to stay with her dad, and she's basically on this mission to find this guy that she has become friends with online, but she doesn't tell the guy, the online friend, that she's in his town. So she's trying to basically like suss him out without him actually knowing, but she doesn't even know his real name. So she's on this little quest to figure this out. He doesn't even know that she's there, and while she's there, she is making friends and getting a little part-time job, and she meets this guy who works with her at her little like summer job, and it starts off like they don't like each other at all, but they slowly become friends, and you can kind of see where things go, and she's kind of caught in between this. I'm starting to really like this guy that I work with, but I also have this really great friendship and this crush on this guy that I met online. Like, what am I gonna do? And it's just like a fun time. This is a great summer read as well. And lastly, for YA romances, we have Better Than the Movies. This is probably my favorite out of the group that I've just shown you. This was a 5-star read for me, and this is a rom-com, and you will notice there are not a lot of rom-coms in this collection of books that I have to show you. I am so picky with rom-coms, and there's not many that I absolutely love. Like, I can enjoy them, but there's not many that I like love, and this is one that I just really adored. It is definitely very YA. It feels cheesy, it feels cringy, but this one just feels cheesy in the best way possible. Like, it's so cringy that it's bad, that it's good, you know? Because we have so many to get through, I'm trying to like give you a brief understanding of what they're about without spending 20 minutes talking about each book, because I feel like I could. But this one is childhood friends to rivals to lovers, and it's like neighbors to lovers, so there's a bit of like forced proximity with that one as well. It's about a girl in high school. She has a crush on this guy, and she enlists the help of her neighbor, convinces him to help her get him to notice her. Her crush to notice her. Hopefully that makes sense. But as you could probably assume, kind of goes a little bit differently to how she first expected it to. So it's really cute. A very feel-good book. So if you need just like a fun, light, feel-good book, this is the one for you. Moving on to our next little group of romances. This is what I like to call literary fiction romances. So romances that are definitely not like rom-coms, and they usually just have like a bit more nuance, a bit more depth depth to them than your classic romance. So the first one I have in this category is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. So if you like Emily Henry, I would assume you would like the other books that I'm about to show you. That's what I mean when I say like this like literary fiction kind of vibe to them, because Emily Henry, I feel like she's the perfect combination of romance and lit fic. Book Lovers is kind of like a complicated plot to explain. Basically, there's a girl and a guy. They both work in the book publishing industry. They don't necessarily work together, but they know of each other. But our main girl, Nora, goes on a vacation with her sister to this small town. You can read the book if you want to know why. And when she gets there, she realizes that her like arch nemesis, her rival, Charlie, lives in this small town. And so because they're both in this small town together, they kind of have a few run-ins, and over time they become more friendly with each other, and you can kind of like guess what happens from there. It is so much more than what I'm describing. This has really great family dynamics, really great just like plot going on behind the romance as well. I really love Emily Henry's writing. I would say that her writing is a lot more slow. It's definitely not fast paced, but it's just really good and just has so much depth to it. Another one in this little category that I've made up that I don't even know what it's called is One True Loves by Jenkins Reid. I love TJR. I think she is an incredible storyteller. This book is about a woman who gets married to her high school sweetheart, and then years later he disappears in a helicopter crash. He is pronounced dead, and so she obviously moves on with her life. She has to. This book also has really great descriptions of grief. I thought that was just really well done. But obviously she moves on with her life. She kind of continues living despite having this really awful thing happen, and eventually she falls in love again, and she's finally like happy again, and she gets engaged. And a couple months after she gets engaged, she gets a call. She answers the phone, and it is her husband, who she thought was dead. Turns out he's alive. He survived the helicopter crash. He's been just missing basically, and they finally found him, and he is coming home. And so now she has to decide what the heck she's gonna do. Does she go back to her first love, her first husband, or does she stick with this new guy that she's fallen in love with? What's she gonna do? No one knows. Well, you know if you read the book. And lastly in this category, we have a book that I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and I wish more people would read it so I could talk to them about it. It is Last Time We Met by Emily Houghton. This is a childhood best friends to lovers second chance romance. These two characters were best friends. They grew up together, and then as like young adults they get separated. One of them leaves to go live overseas, and the other one doesn't really understand why or what's happened, but obviously they both move on with their lives. And then something happens that brings them back into the same like environment, same town, and they're kind of like, what are we? Like, are we still friends? Like, do you hate me? And it's this whole discussion of like friendship, but also love, and also grief, and also family dynamics. Like, there's so much going on in this book, and I just absolutely loved it. Again, definitely like slower paced, and definitely a little bit more plot heavy. Like, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. It's not just solely focused on the romance, but it is just a really beautiful story, and I really recommend it, especially if you love Emily Henry. I feel like it gives major Emily Henry vibes. My camera died, but we're back. Let's move on to small town romances, because I am a freaking sucker for a small town romance. They're just too good. I think it's honestly because of the found family aspect. I feel like in so many small town romances, it'll be like someone coming in as an outsider. They arrive at this small town, they don't know anyone, they don't have a job, and slowly over the story they get to know people, they'll fall in love, they create just like a little family, and it's just my favorite thing ever. So some of my favorite small town romances that I've read this year: Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. It's so good. I did not expect to love this as much as I did, but it was like a 4.5 star read for me. This is small town, grumpy sunshine, single parent trope. A lot of my favorite things, honestly. I don't really care too much about grumpy sunshine, but when it's done well, it's so good. This one is about Naomi, who gets a call from her sister, who is like, I'm in trouble, I need your help. So she drives on over to the small town where her sister is living, only to get out of her car, walk into a motel, find out that she has an 11-year-old niece that she never knew existed. So her twin sister has an 11-year-old daughter that she didn't know existed, and while she's like, what the heck, I have a niece, her twin sister, who is really just like an evil twin sister, steals her car, flees town. So now Naomi is stuck in this town that she's never been to. She doesn't know anybody. She's now stuck being the guardian of her 11-year-old niece that she didn't know existed. She doesn't have a job. She doesn't have a house. It's just very messy. But over the course of the book, she meets a guy, a very grumpy guy. She also obviously finds a house, finds a job, also just like falls in love with her niece, her 11-year-old niece. Like, they just create this really beautiful like friendship slash like family love, you know? And it's just really, really beautiful. The found family in this is amazing. And Lucy Score is coming out with another book in this little like companion series that will be about like other characters in this small town. So I cannot wait to read the next story in this one. They just came out with the cover. I'll put it on the screen. It's so cute and it's going to match this one so nicely, and I'm just so excited about it. I also read Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover this year. This is the only Colleen Hoover that I have to talk about in this video, but this one is about Kenna, who has been in prison for the past few years, and she's just been released, and she decides to make her way to a small town where her daughter is living. So she gave birth right before she went to prison, and her daughter has been raised by the paternal grandparents. And so Kenna shows up in this town to basically take her daughter back and become involved in her daughter's life and just become the mum that she's always wanted to be. This small town doesn't really want her there. The grandparents don't really want her there, and she just figures it out from there and falls in love along the way. Also, the guy, like the love interest in this book, is one of my favorite love interests out of all of Colleen Hoover's books. He is just so lovely. I really, really like him. A couple of other small town romances that I don't have the physical copy of, but I want to talk about. I read them on my Kindle. First of all, we have Travis, and if you haven't read Travis by Mia Sheridan and you've read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan and enjoyed it, you need to read Travis. I feel like a lot of people just don't know that Travis exists, but this book is another small town romance, and it is about Travis, who is Archer's cousin. So I wouldn't recommend reading this unless you have read Archer's Voice. It's technically a standalone, but it touches on a lot of topics that you won't quite get, or you won't get the depth of unless you've read Archer's Voice. But yeah, we meet Travis in Archer's Voice. He's Archer's cousin, and he's honestly just not really that nice. He's an awful guy, actually. And his book, Travis, is kind of his redemption arc a little bit, but you get to find out a lot more about Travis's backstory, but it's also set in the same town as Archer's Voice, so you still have that same small town vibe, a lot of the same like found family. You also get to see Archer and kind of more of his story a little bit. I love seeing snippets of characters that you loved in other books cross over into other books. It's just so nice. I really like Travis. I didn't like it quite as much as Archer's Voice, but it was still just a really beautiful story, a very like emotional story, similarly to Archer's Voice. I feel like Mia Sheridan's books are all just quite like heavy emotional books, at least the ones I've read so far. But I just love the small town aspect, and it's really beautiful getting to see the character development of Travis and also seeing him fall in love. I also just really recently finished All Roads Lead Here, which gave me major Things We Never Got Over vibes. So if you liked this book, you need to read All Roads Lead Here. It's my first Mariana Zapata book, and I just really, really enjoyed it. It's a slow burn, single parent trope, small town romance. It also touches on grief, and it's just another really beautiful story about a girl kind of going back to her roots and just like creating a new life for herself after walking out of a really long-term relationship that was just not serving her, and she finally realized it wasn't serving her. And so being able to watch her like become her own person after just being treated so badly is also really just beautiful to watch. And I also really recently just finished Indigo Ridge. Indigo Ridge is part of the Edens companion series. The Edens is a family in Quincy, which is like the small town where all of the books in the series are based. And the Edens are a really like prominent family, really well-known family in Quincy. And the Edens is a family where there are 6 adult children, so like 6 siblings, and eventually each sibling is going to have their own book in the series. So there are 3 released at the moment: Indigo Ridge, Juniper Hill, and Garnet Flats. I've only read Indigo Ridge. I have started Juniper Hill, and I'm really excited. I think I might end up loving that one even more. But in Indigo Ridge, we have our main character who comes to Quincy because she has applied and got the job of chief police officer. And so she's the new chief, and a lot of people just aren't really happy because she's an outsider. She's not like part of the small town, and it just takes a really long time for her to get like accepted and integrated into the community. But she also meets one of the Edens boys, and they start off not really liking each other. Well, they start off really liking each other and then not liking each other, and then slowly like each other again. It actually has a trope that I do not really like, but I liked it in this book. It was just really good. And also something that I really like about Indigo Ridge is it has a really great plot. So it's almost like a mystery romance, because the chief of police, our main character, is also trying to solve a mystery during this book. So they find a dead woman, and they're obviously trying to figure out how she died, why she died. So while we've got this like romance, we've also got this mystery plot going on, and I just love romance with a really great plot. So it just had a lot of things that I really love. The small town, found family, character development, really recommend. And I'm pretty sure all of Devney Perry's books are currently on Kindle Unlimited, so get in while you can, because I don't know if they'll always be there. Moving on, I want to talk about some like emotional romances that I really, really like. The first one is The Truth About Love by Maisie Myers. This is also on Kindle Unlimited, but this one is about a teenage girl who moves to this new town in Florida, I'm pretty sure, and this guy just takes an interest to her. Like a guy in her class is like, who is that girl? And they start this love story. But this book spans over many, many years, and also just like many different parts of both of these characters' lives. There's a lot of discussion about mental health in this book, so whilst it's great discussion and shows really great representation, it's also like a trigger warning as well, so definitely be aware of that. But it's just basically about this girl who is just really struggling with her mental health, and this guy who is so in love with her and just like so desperate to want to help her, but she just like doesn't want to be helped, or she feels like she's holding him back. So it's this really like push and pull, back and forth, emotional love story about two people who want to be together because they love each other, but just like life and mental health and all of these things keep getting in the way. So it's a really beautiful story, but it's also a little bit more heavy and difficult to read. And this is also Maisie Myers' debut novel, and I thought it was amazing. And she's just released her second book, which I haven't read yet, but I'm definitely going to, so can't wait to read that. Another really emotional romance that I love is Most of All You by Sheridan, who is also the author of Archer's Voice. Most of All You is about two really broken people, both just gone through a lot of trauma, basically. And they somehow find each other, and they really like find healing over the course of the book. And it's just so beautiful to watch. But again, kind of similar to The Truth About Love, it's got that kind of push and pull. Like the girl is kind of like, I want to be with this guy, but I'm not good enough for him. And he's kind of like, I want to be with this girl, but I don't feel like I can kind of give her my all because I've got all this trauma. So it's just really emotional, really heavy, but beautiful character development. And then the last one in this little category is Bright Side by Kim Holden, again on Kindle Unlimited. And this one is about a girl who goes to college, and she is basically just trying to live her best life, but she is just like the most like wholesome, sweet girl you will ever meet. So positive and just such like a ray of sunshine, and everyone whose life she enters, she just like makes it so much better. And so it's just a really beautiful story to read, because you just see her like creating these friendships and these relationships of these people in this town and all these people that she meets, and she just like changes their life for the better. But also along the story, she's like hinting that there's like something going on in her life. She doesn't really reveal it until really far into the book, but you know that there's something like bad going on in the background. Like there's something, and you don't quite know what it is. I would say it ends up being quite a heavy book. It made me absolutely bawl, and I don't feel like I cry at that many books, and that one I was like sobbing, even though I was really expecting it. Like by the end you know what's coming, and I still was like sobbing. So if you want a book that's gonna make you cry, I definitely recommend Bright Side by Kim Holden. Moving on to just like other This is a category where it's like I just have books that didn't really fit into any of the other categories that I wanted to talk about. The first one that I do want to touch on is Addicted After All by Krista and Becca Ritchie. This is like in the middle of the Addicted / Calloway Sisters series, so I really hesitate to talk about this. But I started the Addicted series last year, so I can't really talk about it in my favorites of this year because I didn't start it this year. But this book I read this year, and this is by far my favorite book that I've read in the series so far. And I will say, if you want to read the Addicted series, it probably took me like 3 books until I was really invested. A lot of people say it takes them till book 4 until they're really invested. If you want to read the Addicted series, just keep at it. Sometimes it's not a book that you love straight away, but after you've been with the characters for a little while, you really do fall in love. And this book is like the one where I was like, I am obsessed. Like these characters feel like my family. They feel like my best friends. So I had to just touch on it, even though it's literally in the middle of a series. But I definitely do recommend the Addicted series, but it is a very long series. It's like 10 books, so be warned. Another book that I just didn't know which category to put it in is Shatter Me. This is a dystopian / fantasy. I was going to talk about other fantasy books in this video, but I think I'm going to make a whole nother video talking about like my favorite fantasy reads of the year / if you want to start fantasy, what I would recommend. But honestly, if you do want to start fantasy, this is one of my recommendations. But this book just has the best romance subplot ever. This is again another series. It is quite long. I think it's like 11 books including all the novellas, but it's only 6 if you don't read the novellas. And I wouldn't say Shatter Me is like my favorite book in the series. I would say my favorite is either Ignite Me or Restore Me. But the romance subplot in this book or in this series is just chef's kiss. But if you want a romance that is not just a romance and it actually has like a lot going on, definitely recommend this series. If you liked The Hunger Games, if you liked Divergent back in the day, definitely recommend picking up this series. Next we have Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino. This is not my favorite book by her, but it's the only one I've read by her this year, and I still really enjoyed it. It was like 4 stars. This is a second chance romance. We have our love interests who meet in college and they fall in love, and it's actually so beautiful to watch them fall in love. I loved just like seeing their story, but they somehow get separated, and then I think like a decade or like 15 years or something later, they reconnect, and it's really, really interesting to see why they reconnect and what has happened in this, like in between the time that they've seen each other last. There is so much that has happened, and it's so much more than just a love story. So definitely recommend Before We Were Strangers, but I also really recommend Swear on This Life by Renee Carlino, especially if you loved Love and Other Words. But I read that last year, so I shouldn't really be recommending it in this video. We also have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This was a lot of fun. This is one of the only other rom-coms that I have on this list. I think this is just perfect if you want something pretty light-hearted. You're not looking for like the best literary read you've ever read in your life. You just want a bit of a light-hearted, fun read, rom-com. It also has a decent plot to it as well. Like, it's actually interesting to see what the characters are working on. This one is about a woman who goes to work at NASA, and she gets paired up with this guy that it's like enemies to lovers, but like, I hate saying enemies to lovers in romance because it's never really enemies to lovers unless it's fantasy. But the guy that she's paired up with, she knew him in college, or at least like a few years back in a previous like lab setting, and she is convinced that he hates her, but secretly he's been in love with her the whole time. Surprise, surprise. But it's just a really cute story, and it's really interesting reading about the project that they're working on together, because NASA is just interesting. They're literally working with astronauts. Who doesn't want to read about that? So it's definitely just like a fun, quick, easy read. And lastly, in this category, we have Ivy by Willa Nash, who is actually Devney Perry, which I didn't realize at the time. But Ivy is just so interesting because it is very like Pretty Little Liars-esque, or like Gossip Girl kind of vibes as well. We get the POV from 3 girls who are going to college together, and they are all roommates who live in this really extravagant house that one of the girls owns because her family is just like uber duper rich, and so she rents out the other rooms in the house. So there's 3 girls who live together, all very different personalities and very different people. One of them is like absolute mean girl, and the other one is like her best friend, so kind of like sidekick of the mean girl, and then the third one is kind of like coming into this group out of nowhere. And so there's like this like level of like friendship slash kind of like catty drama going on, but also all 3 of the girls in the story have a romance going on. So there's like 3 romances in one. I don't know if it would be everyone's cup of tea, but I thought it was just really interesting and just like not your average romance. So I quite enjoyed it. It is a bit spicy though, so keep that in mind if that's something that you do or don't enjoy. And then lastly, I want to talk about my favorite romance books that I've read this year. I can't help but just like swoon over these books. I've got to say it. Magnolia Parks and Daisy Hates. I'm currently still reading the 3rd book, so I'm sure that would be in this list if I had finished it. But the Magnolia Parks universe is just 10 out of 10. I would give these 10 stars if I could. 10 stars out of 5. These are just my absolute favorite books that I've read in such a long time. I'm calling it now. These are probably going to be my favorite books of 2022. Even above ACOTAR, even above all of the fantasy books I've read. I just cannot get over how much I love these books. I know that these are not for everyone. I know that. So take my review with a grain of salt, because people hate these books, but a lot of people love them too. So like, let people love what they love, and also let people disagree with you. It's totally fine if you don't enjoy these books. They are about very toxic relationships, but they also have that huge like soulmate kind of love going on. Magnolia Parks is about Magnolia and BJ, childhood best friends to lovers, second chance romance, third chance romance, fourth chance romance, whatever you want to call it. Trigger warnings for this one. There is talk of cheating, drugs, overdosing. Like, there's a lot of heavy topics in this book, but there is amazing found family in this, and it's also just like my favorite writing that I've ever read. And then in Daisy Hates, again, love the writing because it's the same author, but this one is about Daisy Hates and Christian, and also Daisy's brother Julian. And Julian and Daisy's family is really involved in the mafia scene, really like high class mafia scene in London. Both of these are like high society London. And so the way that I like to describe this book is basically like Fast and Furious vibes, obviously without the car, but like the mafia kind of gang vibe that Fast and Furious gives, and the found family that Fast and Furious has. Daisy Hates is Mia, and Julian is Dom. If you know, you know. This is like Friends with Benefits, but then they obviously catch feelings. Surprise, surprise. It's just really interesting. I really liked both of these, both of them 10 stars, absolutely love them. Best books I've read in 2022 so far. But oh my goodness, I have been talking for so long, but those are all the books that I have to share with you guys today. I hope you've found a new recommendation or another romance book that you can try out and see if you love. I love reading about love, I love people finding love, I love people falling in love and just being happy and having their happily ever afters. It just makes my soul happy. But my SD card just ran out of storage, which means I've been talking for too long, so I'm gonna be quiet. But I love you guys. Subscribe if you haven't already for more book videos. I'm always posting more book videos because all I ever want to do is talk about books. But hopefully I will see you guys in my next video very soon. Goodbye.